Good day. I'm Andrea Spindle, Executive Director of the Canadian Anti-Semitism Education Foundation and co-chair of End Jew Hatred Canada, a new grassroots organization that is exposing the haters and calling them out. Welcome to the CAEF webinar, Challenging the Media, Politicians, and Academia to End Jew Hatred. Our program today is dedicated to the memory of Dr. Sarah Halimi, the victim of a hate crime in France, for which her murderer has not, and apparently will not, be tried in court, so justice will not be served. The Jewish world mourns Dr. Halimi, a kindergarten teacher who was targeted because she was a Jew. Across the globe, people were shocked by the French court's decision and also deeply saddened by this horrific crime. Changes to the law promised by France's President Emmanuel Macron, that is likely quite insufficient to stem the tide of anti-Semitic crimes or staunch the spread of Jew hatred in France and across the globe. Our presenter, Philippe Karsenty, and moderator, Brooke Goldstein, will explore what needs to be done. This webinar is being recorded. Comments and questions may be submitted via the Q&A function, which we will get to later in the program. Before I introduce our speaker, I have the honor of introducing Yonathan and Esther Halimi, the son and daughter-in-law of the late Sarah Halimi, who are with us from Israel. They have generously offered to say a few words to our international audience, and we sincerely thank them for their time. And we have with us a gentleman who will interpret. Yehuda is also in Israel. Go ahead, Yonathan.
Donc, je vais parler en français. Je m'excuse pour ceux qui ne comprennent pas le français. Si vous préférez, je peux parler aussi en ivrite. S'il y a plus de demandes d'ivrite, c'est comme vous voulez. Alors, je me présente. Je suis Yonathan Halimi, le fils de Sarah Halimi. Dernièrement, on a pu entendre beaucoup parler de ma mère, Sarah Halimi, suite à la décision de la Cour de cassation, de la justice en France, de ne pas poursuivre l'assassin en justice. La Cour de cassation, la justice en France a décidé que, puisque l'assassin avait consommé de la drogue, du cannabis, alors il serait pas jugeable parce qu'irresponsable, ce qu'ils disent abolition du discernement, c'est-à-dire qu'il n'arrive pas à discerner. Et de là, on a vu un très grand mouvement qui s'est fait en France, et en France surtout, et aussi un peu partout sur tout le monde. Effectivement, il y a eu beaucoup la communauté française, de la communauté juive de France qui se trouve en France et qui se trouve aussi en dehors de la France, mais aussi on a vu aussi beaucoup d'autres communautés qui se sont jointes. Et même en France, on a pu voir aussi, pas seulement des juifs, mais aussi d'autres religions, et même des gens qui étaient athées. Et si on parle d'antisémitisme, alors il faut savoir que elle a été assassinée, ma mère, parce qu'elle était juive. Tout le monde le reconnaît. Lorsque elle a été assassinée, l'assassin a crié Allahu Akbar et il a fait tout ce qui était un tekes djihadiste pour islamiste fondamentaliste, c'est-à-dire qu'il est venu avec son tapis de prière, il a fait sa prière avant et il a ciblé sa victime aussi. Et ce qui est malheureux, c'est que la justice en France n'a pas su reconnaître, pas seulement reconnaître, mais n'a pas su aussi juger cet assassin. Et elle s'est focalisée surtout sur son état mental, sur l'état psychiatrique de l'assassin. Et à la fin, elle est arrivée à une décision que, comme il a consommé du cannabis, alors il avait une abolition de son discernement, il n'était pas responsable. Et ça, c'est une chose qui est incompréhensible. Incompréhensible. Comment une personne qui se drogue de manière volontaire, ça a été volontaire, puisse être jugée irresponsable. Nous, on est sûr que il a été fait, cet acte, c'est un acte antisémite, et ça a été reconnu aussi. Et ce qui est contradictoire, qui est paradoxal, c'est qu'ils reconnaissent que ça a été antisémite, mais ils ne lui donnent pas son discernement, ce qui est tout à fait contradictoire et ce que les gens ne comprennent pas. Ce qui est incompréhensible.
We have, sorry to interrupt, Yonathan, but we have many people asking for a translation because very few people here understand French. Could we just have a pause and get some translation?
Yes. So should I speak?
Yes, please.
Yes. So I'll try to resume very in short what has been said. Yonathan spoke about the fact that that one has heard of his mother, especially after the decision of the justice in France, who decided that the murderer was not responsible because of having taken drugs, cannabis, before doing this murder, which is something which is ununderstandable. The justice has looked only the state of the psychiatric stage, the fact that he was in this high from having taken drugs, and justice didn't stop on the fact that this person, this murderer, did all the Islamic preparation before all the phrases from the Quran and the scream of Allah Akbar that he said that's been heard from people outside. And the justice didn't stop on that and did not take the fact that this murder had been prepared, had been thought of before the victim had been. He had prepared his victim. He knew who his victim would be. It's not something that came up suddenly, and that's why it's really not understandable how the justice in France could act this way.
Thank you.
Yonathan.
Did you want to add anything, Yonathan or Esther? I don't know if Esther wants to come on screen.
Tu veux continuer, Yonathan, à parler?
Alors, la question qu'on se pose, c'est, bon, on sait que l'acte il est antisémite, que l'assassin l'a fait antisémite, mais ce qui est aberrant et ce qui est incompréhensible, c'est la décision et le refus de la justice en France à juger cet assassin. On sait qu'ils n'ont rien fait dans l'instruction pour savoir s'il y avait une préméditation. Ils n'ont pas investigué ni le téléphone, ni le compte Facebook qui a été effacé. Ils n'ont pas essayé de le revoir. Et aussi que la reconstitution nous a été refusée aussi. Ils ont tout fait pour ne pas chercher les motifs de l'assassin et se sont que focalisés sur l'état mental de l'assassin. Et nous, ça nous fait poser des questions. On ne comprend pas pourquoi la justice en France ne veut pas. Est-ce qu'il y a un peu aussi d'antisémitisme dans cette décision-là? Ou alors c'est une impossibilité à la France de prendre ses responsabilités face à cet antisémitisme qui est beaucoup en France, qui est islamo-arabe ou salafiste. Et jusqu'au jour d'aujourd'hui, on n'a pas de réponse pour comprendre pourquoi l'instruction n'a pas été faite comme elle devait être faite.
Je vais traduire. I will translate. Yonathan is saying that this act has been clearly an anti-Semitic act, And the questions that have come up towards the justice that has not been done. Why did they not allow a reconstitution to be done? See what really was behind this murder. It seems maybe that there's something anti-Semitic in the decision itself. What can happen from that? The situation in France is anyway very bad regarding all the anti-Semitic acts towards Jews.
So I think that's what we want to explore, and maybe Yonathan would stay on and maybe answer questions after we get through the presentation. Would that be okay? And I'll go ahead and introduce our other guests now.
Je me demande si tu peux rester et répondre des questions un peu plus tard.
Pas de problème. Pas de problème.
Okay.
Thank you, Yonathan. The question today is, what will bring justice for Jews worldwide if the media, politicians, and academia continue to ignore the intensity of Jew hatred within their own institutions and disregard the connection between anti-Semitism and anti-Zionism that festers within? Philippe Karsenty is a French politician and founder of Media Ratings, a company monitoring the French media for bias. He came to the public attention when he was sued for libel by the public French television network France 2 over his accusations of staged footage by France 2, which claimed falsely that the Israel Defense Force was responsible for the killing of the 12-year-old Palestinian boy, Mohammed El-Dura. It's a famous case. It's important to note that Karsenty won his appeal in 2008, and that footage from before the incident showed Arab youth performing, falling down, getting up, and creating the fraud that was later to be exposed as part of what has been called Pallywood, video fakery by the Palestinian Arabs of crimes or hostile acts by the IDF intended only to exploit sympathy for the Arabs and use the international press to damage Israel's reputation. During 2020's US presidential election, Philippe Karsenty was the Republican Party spokesperson in France. Brooke Goldstein is speaking to us from Israel, but she's usually based in New York, where she's executive director of the Lawfare project, an NGO dedicated to raising awareness and facilitating a response to the abuse of Western legal systems and human rights law. She has founded and managed several nonprofit organizations, including the Children's Rights Institute, which tracks, exposes, and legally combats violations of children's basic human rights around the world. She contributed to founding the progressive Jewish organization Zionists, for which she coined the phrase, Zionism is a progressive value. More recently, she initiated the grassroots movement End Jew Hatred, which is inspiring Jews across the US and Canada to expose Jew haters and hold them accountable. She's also co-founder of A2B Film Productions, Inc., and an award-winning documentary filmmaker. Brooke is also co-author of a book on Lawfare, a regular commentator on US media, and the recipient of many awards for her legal and humanitarian work. And it's now my pleasure to welcome Philippe, who will speak first, and Brooke, who will then moderate a conversation. Thank you. Philippe.
Okay, thank you very much. Well, first, thanks for inviting me. You know, I've been missing all these trips all over the world, so I'm really glad to be in Toronto, at least through Zoom. And I'm glad to see my friend Brooke. Hi, Brooke. Look, I also remember, I'm sorry, when I'm talking to people in Toronto, I'm also thinking about the late Salomon Ben Zimra, who I met a few years ago before he passed away, with my friend Goldie Steiner. So I just wanted to remember Salomon. So let me just tell you something. What you will hear from me now is very different from what you've been listening in the media during the past few weeks. Of course, we have all lots of compassion for Sarah Halimi and for her family. I mean, everybody is upset by what happened lately in France with our judicial system. But I'm going to tell you something which is maybe different. I was not happy with the demonstrations in France, in Paris. By the way, I was not at this demonstration. And I would tell you something, it was different when I was thinking about the demonstrations abroad, and I will explain you why later. Why wasn't I happy with the French demonstration? Because this will not resuscitate Sarah Halimi. Even a trial will not prevent another attack. In this case, they used insanity. The criminal lawyers used insanity to avoid a trial. But our main concern should not be that there is a trial or that the trial will take place. Our main concern now should be to make sure that this will never happen again. And I'd like to come back to insanity. And I'd like to remind Albert Einstein's definition of insanity: doing the same thing over and over and expecting to achieve different results. So who is insane in this case? The murderer or the Jewish community? With all these demonstrations, will all these demonstrations prevent any other anti-Semitic jihadist attack? And I'm asking, did all our demonstrations in the past, after Ilan Halimi, after Toulouse, after Hyperkosher, prevent Sarah's Halimi murder? After all these crimes, there were trials afterwards. Even some kind of justice came out, but it did not prevent Sarah's Halimi's murder. And the barbaric attacks against the Jews went up. Why? And I'm going to tell you why. Because the French Jewish leaders don't fight. We only have court Jews who are leading the Jews to the next slaughter. The French Jewish leaders behave like a battered woman who begs for love for her tormentor. There is only one way to prevent the next anti-Semitic jihadist attack. It is to be strong. Were all the gatherings in France a demonstration of force? I'm really asking you, do you think that 20,000 people, mostly Jewish people, Jews in the street, was it a demonstration of force? I'm telling you, no. My answer is no. It was a demonstration of weakness, because it showed that only a few group of a small group of Jews was interested in this story. And let me be precious. And I had to do them during the Al Jarrah legal fight. I just want to ask you a question. Do you want me to remind what is the Al Jarrah fight, or shall I skip it?
Maybe you could just give a quick summary if people are not aware of that.
Okay, so the Al Jarrah fight was 20 years ago. France 2, the French public TV, broadcast a fake news report showing a young Arab boy supposedly killed by the Israelis. And France 2 broadcast it all over the world. They offered it to all the TV channels, and it became the poster child, the poster of all the Second Intifada. This picture was used as a justification for the killing of Daniel Pearl. Mohamed Merah, when he killed in Toulouse, said also that he was taking revenge for the Arabs killed in Gaza. So it became the worst blood libel of our generation. So I think you have to understand that in all the Muslim countries, they have monuments, streets, squares, whatever, remembering of Muhammad al-Dura. Okay, so our concern should be to prevent the next attack. And for many in France, I must tell you, those demonstrations were just kind of a social gathering. The people felt really frustrated and lonely, and so they wanted to gather and to feel better. But I'm asking you, why do we have these jihadist attacks against the Jews in France? And I have the answers. The answers are very easy to see just under your eyes. It's because of the incitement. The incitement comes from different fields. You have first the media outlets, second the academics, and then the mosques. And also because we have French politicians who are appeasing jihadist leaders all over the world. By the way, I'm asking you a question, and just think of it. Do you remember that, or do you know that the French policemen were behind Sarah Halimi's door when she was massacred? I mean, remember this. It's really important to understand. There were policemen behind the door when the guy was torturing Sarah Halimi. And do we have now the French Jewish is confronting the French police failure? Of course not, because they are core Jews. They're not doing anything to really fight for the Jews. They prefer bring the case to Israel. And I'm telling you something, they never confront the French authorities. And now we have the French politicians, all of them collectively are responsible for the incitement against the Jews for decades. And you know what they did, all these people? They came to the demonstration and they were welcomed by the core Jews. I mean, they should have been expelled from this demonstration because they were part of the problem. And what did they do? They took pictures. So the French Jewish leaders were so happy to take pictures with them. And what happened with the pictures? These politicians will use them in their next political campaigns for the Jewish neighborhood. So that's completely absurd. Absurd. The situation in France is crazy. Now, you may ask me, okay, so if you don't want to demonstrate, what is your solution? I'm telling you, according to me, there are a few actions which have to be taken. And our only goal should be to stop Jew hatred. So first, we have to confront the French media outlets for their lies. And the French Jewish organizations never fight for the truth when the Jews or Israel are defamed. The same for the Israeli embassy or the state of Israel. For example, when I won my appellate court trial on Al Jazeera, the French Jewish organizations were silent, as with the Israeli embassy and the Israeli Ministry of Foreign Affairs. All their job was to put the dust under the carpet. They didn't want to fight. And we also have two lies. I'm telling you something. I don't know how it is in Canada, but I've seen it in the United States and in France. Be careful. The next generation will be much worse because the level of anti-Semitic brainwashing in the university is skyrocketing. And now when it comes to the politicians, we have to hold them accountable for their actions and also for their inactions. They never fight against Islamic extremism in the mosque in France, okay? For example, they claim that they closed 5 mosques when hundreds are inciting against the Jews and Israel, and nothing is done. I can tell you also that when you go to Facebook and Twitter and all these things, they will close the accounts of some people who are contesting the election. I'm also asking you, how do these people behave when it comes to Iranian leaders or the Iranian ambassador when they promise to destroy Israel? Personally, I used to be a deputy mayor in Neuilly. My mayor invited the ambassador, the Iranian ambassador, as a guest of honor in our city hall. I came into a huge fight with him because I wanted, he's the mayor, we have to respect the guy. No, it's very important to confront them. And we also have to confront our political leaders when they give money to the Palestinian Authority. I mean, Mahmoud Abbas is sponsoring jihadism against the Jews, and they reward every terrorist action and crime. These people get money for their crimes. So I'm going to tell you something when coming back to demonstration. French authorities don't care about our demonstration in France. They only care about their reputation abroad. So we have to name and shame France. Our demonstrations in France were ineffective, but your demonstrations were very useful. If people in North America and around the world started to stop buying luxury French clothes or French wine, maybe the French government will take our concern more seriously. And I'm going to tell you something which, I mean, I hope the Halimi's family will hear. There is something completely absurd in this case. And one of them is that the lawyer who was responsible for the accusation against me on the his name is Francis Spinner. And now you have to know that he is the one suing for the Sarah Halimi's family in Israel. That's insane. That's crazy. This guy has been a traitor. He's been covering the Jews with slander for years and decades. And let me to remind you what he said at my trial. He said, and let me quote him because it was taken by journalists. He said, a Zionist is a Jew who gives money to another Jew to send another Jew to kill the Arabs in Palestine. So this is now where we are in France with our court Jews. And I'd like to conclude before giving you the way to ask questions, Brooke. The problem is not anymore for the Jews in France. My concern is for the whole French society, for the whole country, which is under a jihadist large-scale attack. For example, 10 days ago, a French policewoman was beheaded inside a police station. And the result is that by inciting against Israel and the Jews, France has created the monster which is now destroying the French society. Now the French society has to defend itself from the jihadist attacks. The Jews are not, I mean, they are overrepresented in the victims, but just part of victims, not all of them. And Sarah Halimi was killed because she was a Jew. Definitely, it was an anti-Semitic jihadist attack. But when it comes to our legal system, it is infiltrated by far-left, pro-Islamic dhimmi judges. And I don't believe the main point was for the judges that she was Jewish. According to me, the main point was that the murderer is a Muslim. And he got a special pass because of that in the French society. Because our French society is so, I would say, dhimmi, so far-left infiltrated that now they don't want to confront the Muslims when they're doing crimes. And I think it's really, really important to understand this, to understand what was happening in France in these past years and months. I'm done for my introduction.
Over to you, Brooke.
Well, first of all, I want to say what an honor it is to appear on a webinar with Esther and Yonathan Halimi, that I cannot imagine their pain. And I hope that they are comforted by seeing the grassroots mobilization that is taking place, I believe, in an unprecedented level around the world, as Philippe said, not just mobilizing in Paris to protest, and we can talk about the utility of that, but in New York, in San Francisco, in LA, in London, everywhere. This is an issue that has galvanized the Jewish community and unified the Jewish community at a time when we are extraordinarily divided among partisan lines, divided in our methods, divided about approaches to the so-called Middle East conflict, Israel-Palestine conflict. So I want to say that regardless of whether or not we agree or disagree on particular methods, I think we should all agree that what we're witnessing here is something historic and something that I think has extraordinary potential to do what other movements have done for minority rights, which was ensure that there are going to be social and political and other consequences for acts of Jew hatred. So Sarah Halimi's memory, may she be blessed, will be used, God willing, continually by the Jewish community to fight for justice. So I also want to say, obviously, Philippe, it's great to see you again. The Lawfare Project was very honored to be part of your legal defense team. That was truly a very consequential case in France, not just for free speech, but like you said, for exposing the genocidal incitement that the French media aids and abets against the Jewish people and Israelis. So my first question to you is, I was not expecting to hear such a negative opinion of the protests. So I want to deep dive into that a little bit. One of the problems that you're saying is the big box Jewish organizations have become very dhimmi, don't advocate on behalf of the Jewish community. But my understanding is that this protest, which was 20,000 people strong, I don't think that's anything to poo-poo, was really an expression of grassroots mobilization, expression of anger by people who didn't ask for permission from the large organizations, showed up and mobilized and inspired the same type of grassroots mobilization that we're seeing pop up in cities around the world, like I said, without permission or support from these traditional, larger more bureaucratic, shall I say, organizations. Is that not something significant to you? And was it truly grassroots mobilization in Paris? How did 20,000 people end up coming together like that?
Well, first, I'm just telling you, 20,000 is not that much in Paris. I mean, we have so many big demonstrations every weekend on any other issue that 20,000 doesn't mean anything to the French people. The second thing, the 20,000 people were not people, were almost only Jews. If you could find maybe 500 non-Jews, that would be great. So the third and the last thing is that we had this kind of demonstrations with after hyperkosher. We had them after Ilan Halimi. We had all these demonstrations. It never prevented anything. My concern, and you must understand, I'm really upset because I know, I can tell you now, and you can record it, that this will not prevent the next anti-Semitic jihadist attack because they're not doing anything. We have mosques who are inciting.
Isn't that an impossible standard? I mean, it isn't. At this point, okay. I think that the Jewish community has really adopted the shut, still, let's be quiet, put our heads down. The bureaucracies are advocating for us behind closed doors and let them take care of our interests. This expression of collective anger and people showing up to demand change is just the beginning. And the question now is, how do we use this energy and the mass mobilization over international borders to create the systemic change, Philippe, that you're talking about? What would be the next step for these protesters? You're talking about politicians holding them accountable, changes in academia. If we were able to mobilize more protests with specific calls to action in France, what would those be?
Look, I must tell you, I mean, I know that, I mean, it's impressive because it's so shocking. I mean, the story about insanity, the guy who was smoked pot will not be judged. It's shocking, but this will not change anything. I'm sorry again for the Halimi's family. I'm really, I'm very close to Judea Pearl, and I love Judea, and Daniel, after Daniel was killed, was terrible, and we met and we had conversation and everything. But my concern now is we have to fight the right fights. This justice, especially now in Israel, with Francis Pina, who's a lawyer who's been slandering Israel for years, defending the mosque, the worst mosque. He was defending them in France, and now he's the one who's pretending to defend the Jews. So you have to understand, they're not working for the family, they're working for the French establishment.
So tell us, but Philippe, this case, just for our audience in Israel, explain to us what is happening in Israel, because there was a total failure of the French judicial system. You're saying that an attorney has taken it upon himself, someone who is not a friend of the Jewish community, and done what exactly?
He's a Jew. He's a Jew. He's an opportunistic Jew who's been taken by, I guess it's Esther Halimi, Halimi's family. They're bringing the case to Israel, and they're saying that any Jew who's been killed all over the world, victim of anti-Semitism, can bring the case in Israel. But what is insane is that it's coming from the lawyer who's been one of the worst, defending the worst blood libel in France. So, but it will not, again, I'm sorry because maybe I'm not clear enough. My concern is that, I mean, my friends' mothers can live freely and peacefully in France. I'm afraid that with this big demonstration, everything will not change anything, because let me put something clear. Even if this guy was found guilty by a French court of justice, will it change anything in the world about anti-Semitism? No. It's every day we have the French public media outlets, Agence France Presse, France Television, Radio France, who are slandering Israel and the Jews, and that's it. And what do we have? We have
they're doing that because there have been no societal consequences on a mass level. Okay, I know that you don't think 20,000 is impressive because you're seeing other minority rights movements mobilize in the hundreds of thousands. We see that here too. Black Lives Matter is mobilizing in the United States, the LGBTQ movement, the new women's movement. And yet we can only get 200-300 people right now to show up to protest Jew hatred. But what you forget is that Black Lives Matter is 11 years old. It took them 11 years to get to the point where they're able to bring major international corporations to call out instances of anti-Black hatred. The Jewish community, ironically, the oldest and most persecuted minority community in the world, I believe is only right now starting to get its act together when it comes to engaging in what we laughed at previously, which is grassroots mobilization. You said in the beginning, we've been organized top down, and that has served us. It has served us in the past, but it doesn't serve us now. And it hasn't taken us to a place where we can break that glass ceiling, where we can create the type of systemic change that you're calling for. I would, again, caution you against, look, I understand your pessimism. We all feel this way. I'm pulling up the news and every day I'm hearing of an attack on innocent Jewish people who are living in Judea. I'm hearing of an attack. A 1-year-old baby is being stabbed in Brooklyn. And yet, where is the CNN promotion of this? Where is it on every single major news network that are fetishizing? They're fetishizing minority rights. And yet, ending Jew hatred is not at the top of the agenda. The only way that we can begin to demand this, Philippe, is unity of the Jewish community, which we're seeing around what happened to Sarah Halimi, okay, and mass mobilization, which we are just now seeing the start of. I want to mention, however, that
I understand.
We've created a landing page, justiceforsarahhalimi.com. And by the mere creation of this page, we are receiving emails and calls from around the world of people who have not been activated, who want to be activated to do the right thing for their community in a smaller scale and for the Jewish community at large. This is something that I think is very significant historically.
Brooke, I want to make clear. We had courts, we had verdicts after Ilan Halimi's murder. We had verdicts after Hyper Kosher. We had verdicts after Toulouse, Ozara Torah and Mohammed Merah. We had all these verdicts. It never changed anything. And even if you bring justice for Sarah Halimi, it is not changing the problem. The main problem now is that, and it's ironical because we're seeing our worst enemies, the one who are slandering the Jews and helping the French media outlet to slander the Jews. We have them, all these people, for example, who are paying the Iranians, who are paying Mahmoud Abbas to kill the Jews, and now we're having them at our demonstration, and they are applauding them. That's crazy. These people, I'm telling you something. The interior minister who let the French policeman behind the door has to be expelled from all political office for all his life. And we have to create a campaign against the guy to make sure that this guy is out of job for the rest of his life. I mean, we have to be strong. And let me put two things in mirror. You had the Sarah Halimi's so-called trial, which will never take place. And it came out as nothing will happen. On the other side, when you have the George Floyd trial in the States, he is not found guilty over the country. Even Biden, everybody came out. So they have the strength, and we don't have the strength. We're not strong enough. We're not telling them. We're not making them pay a high price. Those we will not riot. We will not kill or whatever. But we will make the politicians pay a high price for their abandon of the Jews. And you know what's crazy now is that it's coming back to them, as they said, after Saturday, Sunday, after the Jews, the Christians. So now we're having, as you know, a few months ago, a professor who was beheaded in the street. 10 days ago, we had this policewoman who was beheaded in the police station. So they are coming everywhere, and they have fed the monster now that we're fighting. And the main problem, you know what, it was a big debate this time in France is there, listen to this, because you have to understand where is the craziness here. Is there a link between immigration and terrorism? Oh no, 90% of the people in the French media say no, there is no link between terrorism and immigration. And you know what? Because they said, but Mohamed Merah, you know, the guy who killed the French Jews in Toulouse, was a Frenchman. Of course, he has French IDs, because you can become French in a minute in France. But it's insane. The main question is, we're talking about Islam, and we're talking about the fact that we are dhimmi. Our countries are dhimmis. And unless we resist and we fight, we will not change. And you know what? Let's make something magic. Let's bring Kobili Traoré, the guy who killed Sarah Halimi, to trial. Let's find him guilty and put him in jail for 30 years.
Philippe, you know I think, listen, Philippe.
No, but just let me finish the sentence.
We're all very
Let me just finish the sentence.
with what's happening. But listen to me. The idea of mobilization, the fact that so many people have mobilized, has guaranteed a very important thing, which is that people around the world know what happened to Sarah Halimi. Too many times are Jews attacked and discriminated against, and it goes without reporting. If anything, what this protest and what these protests are doing are pushing the issue front and center so people can no longer ignore what's happening. That is a necessary step, number one. But number two, I want to actually pivot to Yonathan because he is here with us, and I want to know what he wants to see. What does the family want to see happen next? What is the next step after these protests? How did it make them feel when they saw and they continue to see this type of mobilisation?
Effectivement, comme l'a dit peut-être maître Philippe Karsenty, si c'est maître, je ne sais pas. Et il y a vraiment une vraie volonté de la population qu'on a vue en France, même si c'est que 20 000 personnes, c'est quand même un début d'un mouvement, on espère, et on espère que ce mouvement va s'agrandir. Et comme on l'a dit, le débat doit rester vivant. Et effectivement, il y a eu beaucoup de lacunes sur la procédure. Et effectivement, les avocats n'ont pas été à la hauteur. J'ai entendu qu'on a parlé de maître Spinner. Alors, je peux vous dire que maître Spinner a représenté l'affaire de Yonathan Halimi et il a quand même eu gain de cause sur l'affaire d'Yonathan Halimi. Sur une autre affaire, il n'a pas eu autant de réussite et c'est bien dommage. Maintenant, ce que attend la famille, puisque c'est la question, et donc on me l'a posée, on a besoin du soutien de tout le monde et on a besoin que cette mobilisation, elle soit toujours présente. Et d'ailleurs, il y a un groupe qui s'est fait déjà, qui en quelques jours a pris beaucoup d'ampleur. On espère qu'il va prendre encore plus d'ampleur. Et c'est un groupe en France qui est très vivant, qui est Agissons pour Sarah Halimi. J'invite tout celui qui veut s'associer à ce groupe de s'associer. Il faut vraiment qu'il y ait une pression sur l'opinion publique qui soit constante. Il faut qu'il y ait que l'opinion publique fasse une pression plutôt sur le gouvernement et qu'on puisse aussi attaquer en justice tous ceux qui ont été responsables sur ce dossier. C'est-à-dire pas seulement l'assassin, mais comme on a parlé de la police, il faudrait voir aussi s'il n'y a pas eu au niveau des voisins, parce qu'il est venu par les voisins, il n'y a pas eu de complicité. La complicité dans ce dossier aussi, elle doit être vérifiée. Honnêtement, pour l'instant, on est dans un stade où la famille essaye de réfléchir. Il y a beaucoup de personnes qui veulent donner des conseils. On écoute les conseils. Et il y a plusieurs possibilités et il y a des décisions à prendre. Pour l'instant, on est dans un stade où on réfléchit comment on va continuer le combat. Mais il faut savoir que le combat ne pourra être fait, ne pourra continuer que si cette mobilisation qu'on a vue sur Paris, elle reste vivante, ce débat reste vivant et qu'elle continue à s'agrandir sur les réseaux sociaux aussi et aussi par l'intermédiaire de toute cette mobilisation qu'on a vue et d'un débat qui reste vivant et d'une demande de l'opinion publique de faire justice.
Yes, so I'll translate shortly. Yonathan is saying that the family hopes that this mobilization will carry on, will stay alive, will become bigger, and we'll be able to put pressure on the government through the medias also, which has been started. Yonathan invited everybody to give to support them through the media, and also to put pressure that other things should be also looked through, like Philippe said, also the fact that the police didn't do the job as understood from the family point of view. Maybe there's from the neighbors, people who helped somehow this murder happen, who also must be judged. So that's the hope from the family. They're thinking, he says that they're thinking how to go ahead, but that's the hope that this mobilization will just grow, and that is what will make the pressure on the government to change things.
If I could interject, because I'm following a lot of the questions and comments, and maybe each of you, Philippe and Brooke, can speak to what you see as the next steps, because even if having large crowds and multiple rallies brings the issue of Jew hatred to attention, it can't be the end, right? So what's the next thing you do with that mobilization? I think, Brooke, you've given that a lot of thought. And Philippe, you're saying it may not be even, it might not amount to anything, but without that, I would like to hear what each of you think, because that's what everybody's saying in the chat. What should we do? What should Jews now do?
So just I'll just be super brief. I just want to echo what Yonathan said, is that the mobilization must continue. It has to become bigger. It has to end Jewish complacency. Hopefully it injects in a community an energy to put the public pressure in a strategic way to create the type of change that people like Philippe, who are on the ground, are recommending. So this mobilization has to be, even though it's grassroots, strategically organized to carry out certain goals, and those goals being to affect consequences and change the way that the community advises us to. So if we were to use this mobilization to affect real consequences, for example, for the chief of police who allowed the police officers to stand outside the door for what I understand to be over 45 minutes, listening to the horrific cries and what was happening behind the door, this police chief must be fired, or he must resign amidst this public pressure. If we can direct the public pressure to achieve those types of consequences for this bad behavior, that would be the next steps. Philippe, what do you think?
Look, I agree with you on this particular case, and I think that it's important to have this grassroots mobilization for Sarah Halimi's justice. I agree with this, but again, I used to be a champion of backgammon, and backgammon, you try to think a few a few minutes later in the party or when you play chess. The next problem will come.
You're frozen again.
We'll have another anti-Semitic attack. And again, this will not bring us. It's really important to understand that the French politicians will think that they've done their jobs if they succeed in changing the law for the future, but this will not change it. The law, even if Kobili Traoré is found guilty and goes to jail, it will not prevent any anti-Semitic attack in the future, because these guys are not threatened or afraid of the French courts. My concern is how we stop to feed the beast, and the beast is fed by the French media outlets, which are one of the worst in the world, and the French politicians who are, remember, they are giving money to Mahmoud Abbas, and Mahmoud Abbas is giving money every time a Jew is killed in Judea and Samaria or in Tel Aviv or anywhere. It's very important to understand. I mean, we are in the same boat. All the Jews in the world are in the same boat, and we are, by the French taxpayer, by my money, I'm financing when they're killing the Jews, and that's insane. And we have to have strong Jewish organizations. And I'm telling you something, in Canada, I know that you have, and what they're always doing, they're fighting against our worst enemies. And that's very important, really important.
It's actually going to get worse. You want to speak to that, Brooke? America is about to give several millions more to Mahmoud Abbas and then to the Iranians.
Yeah. I mean, what we're facing right now as a Jewish community, I think, is extremely scary. At the same time, it's very frustrating that there continues to be, after all of these years, a disgusting double standard when it comes to discrimination against Jews and a general public acceptance of the Jew hater. So that's why I think, silence is not an option here. And if we can't rely on the traditional Jewish organizations in France or elsewhere to strategically advocate and strongly advocate for the change that we need to mobilize a different way. And that's why I think this mobilization as the beginning of something very important to empower people to make that change. I mean, look, all it took for the animal rights movement was 2 people and a can of paint. And that brought everything to the world stage and a new type of awareness. So what End Jew Hatred, for example, is doing is getting strategists together to work with local communities who have mobilized themselves and provide the legal, the financial, and the strategic support to create change first at a local level and then at a larger level. Because if we look at the map of what we're facing right now, the threat from Iran, the threat from Qatar, the threat from the extreme right, the threat from the extreme left, I mean, we can all throw our hands up in the air and say, a protest isn't going to solve the Jew hatred. Of course it's not going to. This is a 2,000-year-old problem. But we have to start somewhere. And that's why I find this Sarah Halimi issue and how the Jewish community has unified around it very inspiring. But again, the question is the next steps and what can we do?
So let's go over to Philippe. There are people asking, several things. Should the Jews leave France? Should they elect Le Pen? How will they bring about change? In many countries, there really isn't even a party that would be supportive. I think it's very hard to find politicians who are willing to stick their neck out and be supportive and deal with the issues as described.
So Le Pen is definitely not the solution because she has nothing to offer to the Jews, for sure. The question is now, again, my solution, and I've seen in the comment that some people say, I'm not bringing solutions. Yes, my solution is to be strong and, for example, to ruin the career of the politicians who are working with our enemies. I mean, for example, let me give you an example. The mayor of Paris, Anne Hidalgo, who was at the demonstration. She was projecting a film of her at the demonstration. This woman gave the medal of one of the highest medal to Mahmoud Abbas, the man who killed Jews and who sponsors the killing of Jews. And it's unacceptable that this woman, we have to make sure that those people who are really financing the killing of the Jews have their career ruined. We have to be strong. We have to make them a high price, and that's it. And you will be shocked to know that, for example, one of the deputy mayor of this woman is the wife of one of the guys who organized the demonstration, Gilles Taïeb. That's insane again. We're having a problem because we are infiltrated by people who are inside enemies, people who are just working for their own business. And that's it. We have.
Well, on that note of
again,
the infiltration,
French
I mean,
politicians who are paying for the.
On the
Sorry.
note, though, Philippe, of the infiltration, well, let's put the question to Yonathan. Were you aware of the past work of the attorney that apparently is working for your family in Israel and his efforts to promote the Mohammed al-Dur incitement? Is it possible to look into that and to perhaps find new counsel? This is a big problem.
Brooke, before you ask, I want to tell something to Yonathan Halimi. You need to understand something about Ilan Halimi's trial, and this is very important. And this is historical, but nobody knows it because nobody was really deep inside. Ilan Halimi's lawyer at the beginning was Goldnadel, who was a great guy. But at that time, Jacques Chirac was one of the worst presidents in France against Israel and the Jews. The guy didn't want to anti-Semitism coming out of the blue and coming in the trial. So he came to the Ilan Halimi's family and said, I'm offering you my own lawyer, you won't pay anything. So he brought Francis Piner, and Francis Piner's job was to cover up everything. And he did something insane again, and that all the Jewish organizations agreed because they are completely core Jews. He said, we will, because one of the people who were responsible for the killing of Ilan Halimi were minors, they were under 18. So when you have people under 18, you can ask for the trial to be closed, so that there is nobody able to watch it except the few lawyers. So what he said, he prevented, Spinner prevented the other Jewish organization from suing the case of Ilan Halimi. So he was the only lawyer at the trial. So it was behind closed doors. And the anti-Semitism during Chirac, because you have to understand that the worst things came under Chirac, was protected by Francis Piner. Remember, Francis Piner is an enemy. Francis Piner is a traitor. Francis Piner said, a Zionist is a Jew who pays a Jew to send another Jew to kill Arabs. This is what is Francis Piner. And that's crazy to say that this guy is defending Jewish families, all of this because of the manipulation of the core Jews. I'm sorry, but it's really enraging.
I'm sorry, could you maybe say the question in French now for Yonathan, because it was too fast to be able to translate it.
Jonathan, j'ai beaucoup de peine pour ce qui vous est arrivé naturellement, mais ce qui me rend dingue, c'est que Francis Piner, il a été l'avocat de Ilan Halimi parce que c'est Jacques Chirac qui l'a imposé à l'époque à la famille Halimi, parce qu'il a dit, attendez, je vous amène mon avocat, je vous l'offre, etc. En fait, le job de Francis Piner, c'était de faire ce qu'on appelle un huis clos et d'empêcher que le procès ait lieu et que les médias soient là. Parce qu'il y avait des accusés qui étaient mineurs. Et ce qu'il a fait, il a recommandé fortement avec l'appui de Chirac au CRIF et à toutes les autres organisations de ne pas se porter partie civile. Donc, il était le seul et donc tout s'est passé derrière les portes closes et personne n'a pu faire le procès de l'antisémitisme des années Chirac. Et c'est ça le problème. Francis Piner est un collabo. Francis Piner a dit à mon procès, c'est lui qui a défendu Charles Anderlin. Vous connaissez forcément l'affaire Aldoura avec Charles Anderlin. C'est un sioniste, c'est un juif qui paye un autre juif pour envoyer un juif tuer des Arabes en Palestine, je dis entre guillemets. Voilà ce que c'est Francis Piner. Donc voilà ce qu'on a à faire. Vous êtes aujourd'hui en main. Gilles Taïeb, sa femme, elle est adjointe au maire de Anne Hidalgo. Anne Hidalgo, elle a remis la médaille de vermeil comment il s'appelle, à Mahmoud Abbas. Mahmoud Abbas qui finance tous les attentats. Esther Holden, elle a été tuée et financée par Mahmoud Abbas. Et c'est lui à qui on met la médaille de vermeil. Et ça, la femme de Gilles Taïeb, elle est maire adjointe de Anne Hidalgo. Il faut arrêter de sortir de cette folie. On est infiltré par des gens qui ne travaillent que pour eux-mêmes, pour leur argent et pour leur gloire. Comprenez, c'est pas avec le CRIF que vous serez défendu. Le CRIF ne fait strictement rien pour vous. Je sais que c'est très dur à comprendre, mais il y a d'autres moyens de se battre que de marcher dans leur combine. Ça n'est pas normal qu'on laisse ces politiciens. Le ministre de l'Intérieur qui était là au moment où votre maman a été tuée, normalement, ce type-là devrait avoir sa carrière ruinée à tout jamais. Il a laissé les policiers derrière ne rien faire. C'est ça qui me rend dingue. Voilà, je suis désolé.
Alors, c'est quoi la question?
C'est à moi de vous poser la question, Jonathan?
Non, est-ce qu'il y a une question qui a été posée? Non, moi, je suis d'accord avec vous au niveau de... On se pose aussi des questions, ça reste entre nous, sur Francis Pinel. On peut dire que c'est un échec. C'est pas en son honneur. Mais la question qu'on se pose aujourd'hui, c'est la France, pour la France, les droits de l'homme, le pays des droits de l'homme, comment ils peuvent se permettre de prendre des décisions de cette envergure? Comment ils peuvent se permettre de se tirer une balle dans la tête? Parce que nous, on est la première proie, on parle d'antisémitisme. Et aujourd'hui, ils s'attaquent à nous parce qu'on est les proies faciles, mais demain, ils s'attaqueront à tout le monde. Ils sont prêts, personne ne va les arrêter. Et en prenant,
c'est exactement ce que j'ai dit.
Et en donnant cette décision-là, la contestation, ils donnent un permis de tuer. Tout le monde peut maintenant, aujourd'hui, prendre du cannabis et être jugé irresponsable. Et ça, ce qui est aberrant. Comment ils peuvent laisser une chose pareille? Comment ils peuvent permettre que la France, le pays des droits de l'homme, ne punisse pas les assassins? Et moi, je crois qu'il y avait une question qui m'avait été posée. Je ne me rappelle plus c'était quoi la question de madame. Vous pouvez peut-être me rappeler la question qu'elle a posée avant que vous preniez la parole.
Andrea, you asked a question for Jonathan.
Yes, I guess people are looking for translation here.
I'll translate shortly. Yonathan said that maybe the choice of Espina was maybe was a mistake. The main question is how come France, which is the country of human rights, could behave in such a way, could give out such a decision that can have such a bad impact in the future. That is the question that they can't find an answer.
Well, it's a painful question, but I think we're all living in Western societies that are experiencing the same, despite the supposed stated values of human rights. I think now might be a time to pull one point forward for everybody. Many people are saying, how can they get involved, and are concerned. This is interesting. People are concerned that we're exposing the rent in the Jewish world, that we're disagreeing, that Philippe can say things about court Jews, and that sounds negative, and it sounds like we're not unifying. But I think it's helpful. I think pushing things under the rug and playing quietly is getting us nowhere. So I want to thank Philippe for being courageous enough to come to the Jewish world and speak his mind. I think that's important. I also think it's consistent with what Brooke has been saying in trying to mobilize the grassroots and saying we cannot depend on organized, institutionalized responses. They may have been effective 20 years ago. They are not effective now. So for everyone listening, and I'm reading your responses, everyone who's saying, what can we do? Is this divisive? Who's blaming who? Don't look at it that way. Figure out how you want to get involved. And I'm going to suggest something very simple. Go online to End Jew Hatred. There's a form there. If you put your name and your email down, say where you're from, Brooke's people will get in touch with you if you're in the US. My team of volunteers will get in touch with you if you're in Canada, or send me directly an email at Andrea, ANDRIA, @CAEF.ca. We want to work with people who want to make a difference, who are not shy about standing up and calling it out. We're not even, you'll notice tonight, speaking of anti-Semitism, we're talking about Jew hatred, plain and simple. That's what we're talking about. And we need you to get involved. And everybody that is making comments and asking questions won't get answered immediately. Don't go away and don't say you didn't get heard, but make yourself heard. Get back to us. I think I'm right. Yes, Brooke?
Yeah, I just want to echo one more thing before we sign off. change can happen at the micro level as well as the macro level. And we're all on the same email list. We're all getting equally as frustrated by what we're seeing as the rise in anti-Semitism around the world. But what true communal mobilization is about, and grassroots mobilization, is creating change in your community. So Philippe mentioned incitement, for example. When the Jewish community in San Francisco mobilized over 100 people to show up and protest outside of Zoom headquarters, that resulted in the deplatforming of a terrorist, Leila Khaled. She was going to go on Zoom and spread indoctrination and incitement, the same type of incitement that Philippe is complaining that the French media is allowing. It took 5 local community organizers and 100 people to show up, again, at the parking lot of Zoom headquarters, and they created major change and a real precedent that, again, had ripple effects across the country and is still being talked about now. And then Leila Khaled, again, was deplatformed. Change can happen on a small level and a large level. And what we need to focus right now is instituting and affecting the change that's within our capacity to do so as grassroots activists. And I would not underestimate that.
Do you have final words, Philippe, for our audience? We've had a very excited group here.
Look, first, thank you very much. I've read some of the comments. Some people are telling me you are too pessimistic or you don't bring solutions. Again, I don't want to repeat it, but hold them accountable. Don't give them a free pass. And apart from this case, which is dramatic, when we're talking about Sarah Halimi, we have to think of the future, and the future will be only when we will be strong. And if France gets away with all these propaganda, all these anti-Semitic slanders, then there will be no peace for the Jews in France and all over the world. Because remember, when France is defaming Israel, like as they did with the Aldera case, you have Daniel Pearl who's killed, and you have Jews killed all over the world, and incitement in Judea and Samaria and all this stuff. This is very important. We have to fight back. And if I could do something, I would love that Israel, because the state of Israel is strong, make them pay a high price. And they have the strength, and they're bringing intelligence to the world to prevent terrorism. If they can do this, they can also ask for the truth, just the plain truth.
Before we leave, just one question I think is really important, Philippe. Do you think that the Jewish community in France will continue to mobilize, that there is still an opportunity right now to train and provide financial and other strategic support to the local leaders to mobilize, to effectuate the type of changes that you want? If we were to do another protest 2 weeks from now, what would the call to action be? Do you think there would be appetite for that in France?
I can't tell you. And you know what? We don't need money. We really don't need money. We need strength. We need that we need that the French local leaders go at the government, at Macron, at the prime minister, and go ask for the truth. And you know what? Again, I'm over upset by what happened to Sarah Halimi and what happened with the French judicial system. But think the next step. Let's say, because you know there is something very important I need to tell you, because you may not believe it, but I have lots of Muslim friends, and I even have Muslim friends inside the suburbs because I've been close to them for like 30 years, so we know each other. And I spoke to one of them during this week, and he told me, "Wow, you're so great. The Jewish lobby is wonderful. You had no right to ask for a change in the law, but because of the power of the Jewish lobby, you will make a new law because of Sarah Halimi. You're so powerful." So it backfires against the Jews, because now these guys from the suburbs go and say, "Ooh, the Jews, you're so powerful. You control the country." That's insane. Again, we are going everything is backfires on us. It's really frustrating. My worst word is frustration. You know, you can say Karsenty is frustrated.
But we
We
can't
get
be
that.
silent. Silence is not acceptable. It is not the answer. So I want to thank everybody that's listened in. This has been the most controversial, interesting webinar I've yet tried to organize. I thank Philippe very much and Brooke for participating. Very sincere thanks for the generous time of Yonathan and Esther. There's Esther. We really appreciate it. We all send our love and our thoughts to the two of you and your family. It is true that this terrible story has mobilized the Jewish world. So may Sarah's memory be for the good that we hope to bring to the world. She should not have died in vain. We seek justice, and we'll continue to do so with our effort in Canada and with all across the world, all the different communities. And hopefully that will make the Jewish world stronger and more collaborative. So again, thanks everybody. Please stay in touch. Be well.
We will pursue justice. You have our word, and we will do so by organizing more and more protests that are directed at creating change. And if you want to be a part of those protests, please go to justiceforsarahhalimi.com. Please help us spread this landing page.
Absolutely. Thank you and good night, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you, Andrea.
Tודה רבה, שלום.
Shalom. Stay well.